You ever drive through the high desert at night? Windows down, engine humming, moon carving shadows on the empty highway? That's when you feel it. The air goes still like it's holding its breath. Locals whisper about things that wear your face, but aren't you? Tonight you'll hear their story, and if you've got the guts to stay till the end, you'll never look at your reflection the same way again. Subscribe if you're ready for the truth. And tell me in the comments, would you stop for a stranger at midnight? The wind carried a strange voice that night, low, stretched, and hollow. Sheriff Randall Kearney had driven these roads for 23 years, but this sound cut deeper than coyotes or restless branches. He was called out to Route 191, near the edge of the Navajo reservation, where the asphalt vanished into dirt. The report was simple. A family truck abandoned, doors open, engine running, headlights still burning a path into the dark. Inside were 3 half-drunk coffee cups, a pack of crackers torn open, and a single muddy footprint on the dash. No family, no struggle, just the desert watching. Randall's father used to warn him, "The desert keeps what it wants, and sometimes it wants your name." He never believed it, until that night. As he radioed in, the signal cracked, the air turned metallic, and from the mesquite brush he saw something walking. It was tall, too tall, limbs wrong, head tilted like it was learning to wear a skull. Its movements were both fast and impossibly slow, like the frames didn't match. Then came the whistle, 3 notes, human-like, but hollow. That's when his blood turned cold, because those 3 notes were his father's favorite whistle. His dead father. Randall raised his flashlight. "Hello? You hurt?" The thing didn't answer. It just smiled. His father's smile, wide and broken. And then it ran, faster than anything with bones should. He followed. That was his first mistake. What he didn't know, Skinwalkers don't chase you, they lead you. And by the time you realize it, you're already where they want you to be. The desert has a way of swallowing sound. Sheriff Randall Kearney realized that as soon as he stepped out of the truck and shut the door. No insects, no night birds, no wind, just the static hum of his own breath. That was wrong. Out here, something always moves, always calls. But tonight, the desert was listening. He swung the flashlight toward the dirt road where the footprints began. They were small at first, children's sneakers, 2 pairs, and then a woman's, deeper, like she had been dragging weight. The father's prints ran alongside, stopping abruptly like he'd been lifted off the ground. And then the others. Not paw prints, not boots. They were elongated, jointed, and bent at angles a human ankle could never survive. Almost like a deer stood upright and walked backwards. He'd seen tracks from coyotes, bobcats, even a mountain lion once. But these were borrowed feet. Randall's throat tightened. He remembered the old medicine man he'd arrested years ago for trespassing on federal land. The man didn't fight back. He only said one sentence as Randall cuffed him. The ones who walk in borrowed skin do not like being watched. Back then, it sounded like the ramblings of a drunk. Tonight, it felt like prophecy. He radioed the station again, no signal. The static hissed in his ear like breathing. He found the first sign of struggle. The mother's scarf snagged on a thorn bush, strands torn as if something had yanked her mid-run. A child's stuffed fox lay in the dirt beside it, its glass eyes staring toward the dark ridge line. Then the smell hit him. Rot, wet fur, and iron, blood long soaked into the sand. He should have turned back, called it in, waited for backup. But the sound came again. That whistle, his father's whistle. 3 slow notes. "Dad," he whispered before he could stop himself. The flashlight flickered. In the distance, between the Joshua trees, something moved, its outline shifting like heat waves, but there was no heat. The desert was cold now. Too cold. He followed. Every man thinks he's brave until the night starts remembering his name. If you've ever been on an empty road at night and felt watched, that's your gut talking. Don't ignore it. Subscribe if you want the rest of this story, because this one's only just opening its jaws. And in the comments, tell me, do you believe the government hides creatures older than its own borders? The tracks led Randall into a stretch of land locals called Dead Mesa, a place the maps didn't bother to name anymore. The soil here was blacker, broken, littered with bones of things too small to be cattle, yet too large to be coyotes. The moon hung low, pale as a cataract. Every step felt like walking through a story that didn't want to be told. That's when he saw it. A clearing, perfectly round. Sand scraped into a circle 12 feet wide, symbols carved along the perimeter, ancient, jagged, deliberate. Some looked like Navajo sigils, others were twisted mockeries of them. In the center lay the family's belongings: a shoe, a purse, a broken tablet with the screen still glowing faintly. And something else. A tooth. Human. Root still wet. Randall crouched, his fingers trembling as he held the tooth in his gloved hand. It wasn't just left behind, it was placed, like a breadcrumb for the wrong kind of trail. The whistle came again, 3 notes, closer now. Then a voice. "Randy, it's cold out here, son." His heart stopped. It was his father's voice. His father, who'd been buried 14 years ago in the red clay cemetery 2 towns over. He raised his gun. "Who's there?" No answer. Just a rustle of sagebrush, and then movement. A figure stepped into the moonlight, broad. Shoulders, worn hat. The same plaid jacket his father was buried in. Only the head wasn't right. The eyes were too wide, too dark. And the mouth moved a second before the words came out. "Help me bring them home, Randy. They're cold." And then the figure bent. Too far, bones clicking, its limbs snapping backward like a marionette with cut strings. Skinwalker. But not just one. There were 2 more shapes behind it, tall and thin, wearing the family's faces now. The children, their eyes black, their jaws slack, as if their bodies had been copied wrong. Randall stumbled back, the gun heavy and useless in his hands. Every hunter in the desert knows, you can't kill what was never alive. He remembered the medicine man's other warning, the one he laughed off years ago. They don't want your blood. They want your name, your shape, your echo in the world. And that's when he realized the missing family wasn't missing anymore. They were right there, just wrong. The circle wasn't where they vanished. It was where they were remade. Wait till you hear what he found next, because this wasn't random. This was a ritual, and the government fenced this land for a reason. Subscribe if you haven't yet, because the next part is where the cover-up begins. And drop a comment. Would you step into that circle, or would you run? Randall stood at the edge of the circle, the beam of his flashlight trembling over the symbols. They weren't random. Some were cut into the earth with surgical precision, straight even, scorched at the edges like heat had carved them. And then he saw something. That didn't belong. A thin strip of metal half buried under the sand, gleaming dully. He dug it out. A government property tag. Department of Energy, rusted but recent. This wasn't just some forgotten patch of desert folklore. The government had been here. They'd marked this place, studied it, or tried to contain it. Randall's radio crackled for the first time in hours, a faint burst of static followed by a voice that wasn't dispatch. "Step away from the circle, Randall." He spun. No one behind him. Just darkness and the whispering sage. Then, a vibration under his boots. The ground pulsed. He knelt, pressing a gloved hand to the dirt. Faint warmth, movement, like something was breathing beneath the surface. The sand was alive, or something under it was. The whistle came again, but this time it layered, 1, 2, 3 voices whistling in unison, forming a pattern too deliberate to be wind. And then the smell of ozone, the sharp tang of machinery. He followed it to the edge of the clearing where a half-buried panel jutted from the ground. Old tech, military grade, with wires feeding into the earth. Randall pulled the casing. Open, motion sensors, thermal cameras, and a data log. Recent entries. The last timestamp was just 3 hours before the family went missing. So the government knew. They were monitoring something, feeding it, containing it, or using it. A twig snapped behind him. He swung the light. There, at the edge of the circle, the figures had returned. 3 now, clearer than before. The children, the mother, their faces soft and flickering like old film. But their shadows didn't match. And then one of them spoke. Not with lips, but with a voice that slid inside his skull. "Do you want to see how we're made?" The ground beneath the circle cracked. Randall backed, up as the sand sank inward, revealing a tunnel lined with old wooden beams carved long before the base tag ever rusted here. The air that rose was cold, metallic, and ancient. He raised his gun, knowing it was useless. This wasn't a crime scene anymore. It was an altar. And the family? They weren't missing. They were the offering. It gets worse from here. Because this hole doesn't lead underground, it leads back in time. Stay with me. Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. And in the comments, answer this. If the government knows what walks here, why haven't they closed this road? The air inside the tunnel wasn't like air at all. It was thick, stale, metallic, carrying the taste of pennies and damp stone. Randall lowered himself down the old beams, boots scraping splinters from wood far older than the highway above. The tunnel curved like a serpent, swallowing the light of the moon until his flashlight was the only heartbeat left. He passed carvings on the walls, handprints burned black, claw marks cut deep, and names. Dozens of them. Some were etched in English, some in older symbols he didn't recognize, but one made his stomach lurch. R. Kearney, 1979. His own name, the year he was born. He stepped back, the beam quivering on the letters. Who put that there? How did they know? Something shifted in the dark ahead. A wet drag, a whisper of cloth. He called out, voice tight. "Sheriff Randall Kearney, if you're in here, speak!" The reply wasn't an echo. It was a voice, a young boy's, hollow, far away. Daddy. My legs hurt. The flashlight. Beam caught movement. A small figure crouched head down, clutching a stuffed fox, the same fox from the truck. Only the arms were too long, the spine arched wrong, like it had been rebuilt from memory. Randall swallowed hard. "Where's your mother? Where's your sister?" The boy's head twitched up, the face almost right. But the eyes, black as a tar pit, pupils swallowing the whites. "She's waiting for your name." And then it dissolved. The skin sloughed off like smoke, leaving behind a husk, a twisted leathery shell clinging to a military dog tag. Randall bent down, fingers shaking as he read it. Sergeant James Keller, missing 1968. This wasn't just a place where families disappeared. It had been happening for decades. Soldiers, travelers, drifters. They didn't feed on flesh, they fed on memory, on names, on shapes. Every missing person was a garment, a costume for something older than the desert. Further down, he found a journal half-rotted, pages fused together by time and damp. The legible part read, "The walkers are not beasts, they are keepers. The elite use them when they want someone erased without a trace. They trade names for silence." Randall froze. This wasn't myth. It was contract work. The whistle came again. Only now. It was everywhere. The walls hummed. The sand shifted like breath around his boots. Something was coming, and it already knew his name. You still think these are campfire tales? Ask yourself, why do the missing never turn up? Subscribe if you want the truth, that no one else will read you. And tell me in the comments, if something wore your face tomorrow, who would know the difference? The tunnel tightened the deeper Randall went. The beams turned to stone ribs and the air pressed close, not empty, but watching. He could feel it now. A presence ahead, breathing in the dark, waiting with a patience that wasn't human. The flashlight caught a glint ahead. Something metallic. Another dog tag? He stepped closer. Then he saw it. A figure standing in the passage, broad shoulders, sheriff's badge on its chest. It was him. Not a reflection, not a trick of light. It stood there, wearing his uniform, his face, only younger, cleaner, the way he looked in his academy photo 25 years ago. The doppelganger smiled. "You shouldn't have come, Randy." Randall's grip tightened on the gun. "What the hell are you?" The thing tilted its head. "I'm what you leave behind when you think nobody's watching." The tunnel around them whispered, 1,000 soft breaths, like sand slipping through a narrow throat. Behind the false Randall, another figure emerged, his father, or what wore his father's jaw like a mask. This one spoke in a lower tone. "They offered your name long ago, boy. You've just been living on borrowed time." Randall shook his head, stepping back. No one owns my name." The younger copy stepped closer, boots silent on the sand. "Every missing man, every lost child, they're not gone. They're ledger entries. This land keeps a record. The men you vote for, salute for, they make trades. A name here, a family there. It keeps the wheel turning." Randall raised his weapon, heart hammering. "I'm not part of that." The doppelganger smiled wider. "You are. You're the last Kearney on this soil. Your father made the deal. He lived. They didn't. And now it's time to pay the balance." The ground behind Randall began to shift, hands pushing through the dirt, pale, wrong, reaching for his boots. He stumbled forward toward his own double, the barrel shaking inches from the creature's chest. And that's when it changed. The flesh rippled, bones cracked, the face peeled backward like wet paper, and beneath it, something long, black, eyeless, with a jaw that unhinged far too wide. Not a beast, a collector. It spoke without lips. "Give us your name, Randall. We will wear it better than you ever did." Do you feel that pressure? That weight behind your own reflection? That's how it starts. Subscribe. If you're ready to see the end of this, because the next part, Section 7, is where Randall has to choose. Give his name or take theirs. Tell me in the comments, what would you sacrifice to protect your own bloodline? The tunnel shook with a low hum, not an earthquake but a pulse, like the desert itself had a heartbeat. Randall's gun felt heavier with every breath. His double stood still, jaw slack, black eyes locked on him. Behind it, the thing wearing his father's face spoke again, this time softer, almost kind. You were promised, son. It's why you were spared that night in '79. It's why your sister never made it home. Randall's stomach twisted. He remembered that winter. His sister, 10 years old, vanished from the edge of the property line. They said coyotes. His father never spoke about it again. Now it made sense. This wasn't just about one family lost in the desert. It was a ledger, an ancient contract, traded in names and flesh, renewed by bloodlines. Someone in his family had made a deal. His father lived long untouched. His sister didn't. And now the debt had come full circle. The younger version of himself stepped closer. It doesn't have to hurt, Randy. Give the name, let it pass. They'll stop taking. You'll keep your badge. Your town will sleep. Randall laughed, raw, broken. That's the deal, huh? Feed the land a life every generation and pretend it's just bad luck? The tunnel walls began to seep, not water, but shapes, hands, faces, mouths whispering names. The air grew dense, each breath thick as oil. Then, like a splinter of clarity, he remembered something. The medicine man's words years ago, during that arrest. Names are the leash, but blood is the blade. Randall looked at his palm, small cut from the barbed wire at the scene, still wet with his blood. He stepped into the circle of their shadows, raised the gun, not at them, but at his own hand. I take my name back, he whispered, dragging his blood across the tunnel wall, cutting through the carved sigil that bore his initials. The reaction was instant. The tunnel screamed. The double convulsed, its flesh splitting into strands of smoke. The thing wearing his father's face snarled, jaw splitting into four, lashing out with a clawed limb. But it didn't reach him. The sigil burned, the names in the wall began to fade, and the hands clawing from the dirt crumbled into ash. He stumbled back, dizzy. It wasn't a victory. It was a severance. By breaking the circle, he'd freed them. But freed them doesn't mean sent them home. It means unbound. The whispers turned to laughter. They weren't gone. They were loose. And the name on the wall? It vanished. Randall no longer existed to this land, but that also meant this land no longer had to play by his rules. He thought breaking the circle would end it. It only opened the door wider. The final part, Section 8, will tell you where those Skinwalkers went and what Randall had to become to stop them from wearing every face he ever loved. Subscribe if you're ready for the ending, and tell me in the comments, if you erased your name tonight, who would remember you tomorrow? The desert was different when Randall climbed out of that tunnel. The stars were too sharp, the air too still, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting to see what he'd done. His truck was there, engine cold now, radio dead. But the family's truck, gone. No tire marks, no lights, just sand, smooth as glass. He checked his badge out of habit. It didn't shine. He looked at his phone, blank screen. He whispered his name into the night. Nothing answered. That was the price. By cutting the sigil, he hadn't saved the missing. He had erased himself from the ledger, and in doing so, unleashed every name that ledger had ever bound. The family, the soldiers, the drifters, they weren't victims anymore. They were free agents. Hollow, walking, wearing faces they didn't earn. The first sign was the sound of a baby crying, 40 yards out in the scrub where no one stood. Then a shadow moved across the moon, long and wrong. A woman's voice called, "Randall!" But it was his sister's voice, 10 years old, still lost. He gripped the wheel of his truck and drove, faster than the dust could rise. The road behind him shifted like a snake in the headlights, bodies walking where no road should be, faces flashing in the mirrors, some his, some strangers, all wrong. At dawn, he reached the county line. His badge didn't register. At the checkpoint, his ID read, "No record found." He called dispatch. They asked, "Who is this?" He hung up. That night, in a motel off Route 66, he sat with the journal he'd taken from the tunnel. One page left blank, one line etched into the back cover. The only way to stop a skinwalker is to become something it can't copy. So, he cut his hair, burned his uniform, scratched his name off every record he could find. If they hunted names, he would walk without one. Now he drives the highways the way others haunt their pasts, following whispers, killing what wears the wrong skin, leaving marks only the desert understands. The missing still vanish. The government still trades. The circle's still open. But some nights when the wind dies and the sage turns to shadow, a voice carries on the highway. "Randy, come home." And he grips the wheel tighter, because home isn't a place anymore. It's a debt, and debts in the desert always get paid. If you've been here from the start, you know now, some roads aren't haunted. They're managed. Subscribe if you want more of the truths they paved over, and in the comments tell me, if you lost your name tonight, would you fight to get it back or vanish with the wind?